Good morning and welcome to this month's monthly motivational webinar. My name is Michelle Mott and today's topic must be pretty popular because we had a huge turnout at our 9 o'clock webinar and we've got another good showing at our 10:30. So we are talking today about how to hold those difficult conversations, whether it be at work or at home. As we always do, if you have any technical difficulties, please let Stephanie know. She is standing by, and her phone number for those of you who might be calling in to phone number 515-221-2688 if you have any technical difficulties, and she can help us through this. So let's begin. First of all, for those of you who are using the WebEx platform, if you haven't for a while, we did upgrade the level of the techniques of our service. And we've got a couple features we want you to be able to use. The main screen, you can zoom in and zoom out, so if you wanted to watch the full entire screen. Off to the side, you'll see some features that display some other resources, not necessarily that we're going to be using. The main piece we're going to have you focus in on is on the right-hand side is the panel that has areas where you can look at who has logged in, or at least whatever name they used. We'll have several opportunities for you to get involved, so we want to make sure that you have your chat feature open, and the way you do that is you just simply turn the cursor and it'll open up the box. What you'll do is, oh, I see Stephanie, look at her, she's telling everybody it's my birthday, thank you for spilling the beans. And then we'll be asking you some questions to type in. And then we won't be using the Q&A and polling, but we will be showing you a video today. Last year, many of you knew we celebrated our 25th anniversary at Inspiring Solutions, and we have a variety of different ways that we can help organizations, from strategic planning, leadership development, and team development, to hiring and onboarding. This particular course is relevant for both leadership development and attitudes, because that's the focus point of any kind of behavior. And then we also have some resources on sales and customer service. If you have not, make sure you go out to our new website, inspiringsolutions.com, see all the latest and greatest of our training programs and keynotes. You can download our new catalog, or if you'd like, we're happy to mail a complimentary copy to you. It not only has the programs that we deliver, but we also have a variety of learning assessments and turnkey training kits that you can use on your own. The goals for this hour is to continue our commitment to deliver monthly motivation through the webinar platform. Many of you I know are using them for your own personal and professional development. Many of our clients are actually broadening it to be something that they have groups gather together in boardrooms or training rooms and get a group together and watch. Maybe you project it on a large screen. And it's a way that we can expose you to one of our inspiring programs and our products. This particular webinar is going to help you, first of all, understand why people don't do what you expect them to. I'm going to walk and talk you and even show you a model of a 5 steps to a crucial conversation, and ultimately to help you turn those bad apples into good apples. The handouts for today were given in the instruction email. There's 3 of them. First is the Bad Apples handout that we're going to be spending most of our time on. There's also a description of the Bad Apples program. So if you were interested in wanting us to do it as either a keynote or a training for your either a conference or your organization, the objectives are listed, the agenda, who the audience is, types of industries is really relevant to just about every industry, how we have used this, and then the materials option. Part of what you should know is that the course is taken and is actually going to be utilized during a Attitude in the Workplace certification. So if this is something that you would like to bring into your organization on your own, we're going to tell you about how you could get certified, or we're going to be training trainers to use this material on your own. And then we also have our Fall 2017 webinar flyer to make sure that you know of our upcoming dates and topics. Each time we do a webinar, we'll be asking you to fill out a brief survey right after you log off, and then we would encourage you to do so because it gives us not only comments and suggestions for the platform or the format, but we'll be creating later our 2018 calendar, and so this is a great way for us to know what are your topics of interest. So let's take a peek at the flyer that has our fall webinar and certification schedule. Like you know, we offer each webinar twice each month at 9 o'clock and then repeated at 10:30 Central Standard Time. You can register on our website. I know many of you have registered for the entire schedule, or you can register based on our email blast. Our emails go out to our database on a regular basis. If you would like to make sure you're on our database, be sure to go out and register. We're also encouraging you to spread the news, so feel free to forward this particular flyer on to your coworkers if you want to post it in bulletin boards, send it to your friends, clients, vendors, whoever you think would be of value to that. The one that I wanted to pay a little more attention to, as I mentioned, is the upcoming Attitudes in the Workplace certification, which will be held September 15th and 22nd. It is a more in-depth educational opportunity to learn how to conduct two of our programs, Bad Apples, Dealing with Difficult Attitudes, which is, we're going to be doing components of that today, and then my other signature course called Staying Positive in a Negative World, based on my book, Attitude, The Choice is Yours. And if you register before September 1st, we'll give you a $100 discount. If you would like more than one person from your organization to be certified, we are happy to give you even a deeper discount. When you get certified, you'll be given on a thumb drive all the training materials that you would need, including a PowerPoint, videos, reproducible handouts, and a copy of my book to use in your own toolbox. For my opening quote, I start off with one that you probably have heard: one bad apple can spoil the whole bunch, which means in a team setting, if you have one person who is a holdout, or maybe somebody who's having a bad day, they can truly contaminate the spirit or the teamwork of the group. So we are going to help you learn how to turn those bad apples into good apples. What I'd like you now to do is think and respond using the chat box, the opening question of what are the letdowns you face at work or at home. What I mean by a letdown is, what are some examples, I don't need names, but what are some of the ways in which people let you down? These could be coworkers, they could be people in other departments, they could be, if you're a manager, it could be an employee. If you're an employee, it could be your manager. But what ways, and I'd like for you to type in, and Sarah's already done this, being pessimistic, thanks Sarah, in what ways do people let you down? And I'll give you a little time to think and type. So for those of you who have not used this feature before, use the right column, the chat icon, and then you can send to all participants, type in your message, and then hit send. All right, we've got some sarcastic remarks coming in, passive-aggressive sometimes. Leslie posted to me that not following through on items or avoiding confrontation and in turn agreeing to everything, so not addressing them. Keith says not communicating, working in silos, and that can be from an individual perspective as well as from a department perspective. Joan chimes in, communication between departments. So again, that can be a real challenge when you feel as though you're not collaborating. Brandy types in, offering problems but no solutions. That came up in our 9 o'clock, saying that you're quick on excuses, not on solutions. Another one coming in from Brian, lack of initiative, failure to grasp company quality standards, meaning that you're not playing by the company rules, and that can be anything from your performance expectations to policies and procedures. All right, so it sounds like you guys have had some experience or are currently dealing with some letdowns, and I think this perhaps can help you with those. So before we talk about what you need to do to confront them, I want you to think about it from a different perspective in understanding why people don't do what they're supposed to do. So if you would, turn to your workbook handout to why people don't do what they're supposed to do for several reasons why research have found why people don't do what they're supposed to do. Ferdinand Fournier, in his book, wrote some of the research behind 4,000 employees and managers from a variety of different occupations, the reasons why in the past they hadn't done what they were supposed to do. And there were 10 reasons they gave. What I'd like you to do, first of all, is think about what were some of their reasons. So they had indicated that some of the causes for them not doing what they were supposed to do included unclear expectations. In other words, they weren't clear of what they were supposed to do. No one gave us direction. Poor communication. Poor communication could be anything from no communication to sloppy communication. Maybe it was vague. Maybe there was no deadlines, clear understandings. Another reason why people didn't do, or another cause for the reasons, would be no training. I know my team will chime in on this and say that sometimes as a new employee, you get hired and there's not an adequate orientation or training process and plan. So one of the things that you need to do is make sure that new employees especially get the training they need to be productive in a quick manner, as well as ongoing training to continue to keep up with the changing demands of your workplace. It could be because there was a lack of feedback. You know, everybody likes to know if they're doing a good job, and I also believe people like to know if they're not doing a good job. So it lacked any kind of direction or feedback. Another cause was they felt as though there was some unfair treatment in the workplace, which means that as a manager, maybe you are expecting different things from different people, or you are showing a bias or tolerating lower performance on other people. And then the last cause for why people didn't do what they were supposed to do was they lacked the confidence. They really didn't think that they could. So using these as potential answers to the worksheet, what I'd like you to do on your own, or if you've got a group that are with you, or you can do this as a team exercise, is I'd like for you on your worksheet to identify some possible causes to one of the reasons people didn't do what they were supposed to do. And then what I'd like you to do is work on the one that correlates to the same birth month you were born in. So for instance, those born in January would work on the first one. Those born in May would work on the fifth one. If you were born in November or December, you can pick and choose any of the 10. So let me give you some time now to think about your response for the cause of why they didn't particularly do that. And then again, using the chat box, if you could change the send to all participants, then everyone will read your responses and get some answers. And type in the number and then what your response would be. All right, we got the first one coming in. Thank you, Sarah. Number 6, the 6 was they thought your way wouldn't work or their way was better. So it could be a power struggle. You know, whose ideas are going to win out. We've got another one that's constantly complaining. Not sure which one that applies to, but that could definitely be a reason why. Number 5, they thought they were doing it. So it could be the fact that there was low trust in the workplace. Another one, lack of feedback. So they didn't know if they were doing well or not. Ooh, a lot of May babies, lack of feedback. Number 2, lack of training or having incomplete job descriptions. Yeah, they didn't know when to begin or end it. All right. So there's number 10 coming in. Thank you. Number 10 is they didn't think they could do it. So they weren't given the encouragement or training to believe that they could. All right. Thank you. So let's go through these reasons. All right, Debbie, not asking for help. They didn't know how to do it. So the first reason given, the most common reason why people didn't do what they were supposed to do is they didn't know why. Circle the word why. Why is the power question. Kids continually ask parents the why question, and sometimes we forget to ask that basic but very powerful question to learn. So they didn't know why they were supposed to do the job in the first place. They didn't understand the big picture. Number two, they didn't know when to begin or when to end it. A lot of times in collaborative organizations, something needs to happen before you can do your job. So there wasn't a clear understanding of how you needed to do something so that somebody else could complete a project or a report. Number three, they didn't do it because they didn't know what they were supposed to do. That again is an example of lack of clear instructions. Number four, they didn't know how to do it. The example, I think Debbie wrote in, they weren't willing to even ask for help. I have a new mantra about questions. The only stupid question is the one that doesn't get asked. So I think as a manager or as a team leader or a project leader, you need to make sure that you encourage and expect questions. Because if people don't ask you questions, they may overlook or they may make incorrect assumptions. Number five, they thought they were doing it. Again, the whole notion that, like many of you said, no news was good news. No one said that I was doing something incorrectly. Number six is kind of a tricky. They thought your way wouldn't work or their way was better. And I think Sarah typed in that maybe it's a power struggle. And I will agree that oftentimes in my team's case, I will explain the big picture, what I want or what I expect, and then I'd much rather get out of their way so that they can use their creative ways and strategies, and usually they have a much better way or more efficient way of doing it than I would. Number seven, they thought something else was more important, and thank you, Brandy, for typing in. They had unclear goals or expectations. We had our quarterly update yesterday, and one of the things that we were talking about was what are, in our third quarter, going to be our priorities. And we all have multiple priorities going on at one time, and Stephanie asked at one point, how does that project fit into the other projects I already am working on? So we negotiated prioritization. Number eight and nine are a little bit tricky, so let me give you an example. They aren't rewarded for doing it, or they aren't punished for not doing it. This is a very enabling experience. So for instance, if somebody did what you asked them to do, what do you need to do? You need to give them some thank you, appreciate your help. So if they don't feel as though they ever get recognized, they're not going to be really excited about doing more work for you. And then the second part of that, not being punished, means that if you ask them to do something for you and you didn't, and they never got caught, they really don't have any intention of following through. So if you don't inspect what you want them to do, they most likely won't follow through. I truly believe that people don't do what you expect. They will do, however, what you inspect. So follow through is important. Number nine, I'm going to ask you to think about this one. They are rewarded for not doing it, or they are punished for doing it. Do you have icky jobs? What I'd like you to do in the chat box is send out what are some examples of icky jobs in your office. In ours, it could be the filing. In healthcare, I was just at a hospital and they called it cold brown, if you know what I mean. So I'd like for you to type in what are the icky jobs that are important to do, but oftentimes people don't enjoy or don't like to do them. And again, using the all participants will help everybody read what you are contributing. All right, I got a couple of them. Filing is one. Picking trash. Answering a ton of emails, absolutely, reports. And the notion being is, do you have people on your team that are willing to do those icky jobs, hey Rex, without much complaint? Or do you have those people that will do the job, and because they're willing to do the job, guess what? They get to always do the job, and it's not fair. So you need to hold people equally accountable. And the other part is that, do you have people that work different pace? You know, some people will get more done in a given day than other people. And because they get their job done fast, are they given yet more work to do? So you need to, again, make sure that people are sharing the workload. And then the last reason for why people don't do what they're supposed to do is they didn't think they could. And that example means that they lack the confidence in themselves. Maybe they thought it was too overwhelming, and what you need to do is kind of break it down, help them regain their confidence, knowing that you would be there for support. So the point of that exercise is that you need to realize people do things for their reasons, not yours. I believe that everybody's tuned into the same radio station, WIIFM, which stands for What's in it for me. You need to talk in their terms, not your terms. Another application of difficult people is that you need to help them solve their own problems, because unless they take ownership of the problem, it will continue to be yours. And then the last, as it relates to your relationship with anybody, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I'd like for you to think about having a coaching approach to these difficult conversations. Because if you think of yourself as a coach, you'll present a much more positive, helpful, and supportive demeanor versus having to discipline. If you think of the word discipline, oftentimes it dates back to when you were a child, or you were being disciplined by your parents, or you got trouble in school, and it's usually a very negative or emotional experience. But if you think about disciplining, it's really intended to help change people's behavior. Same to it is with coaching. And coaching, however, seems and feels as though much more positive and encouraging. So if you've got the right attitude about the situation, it's going to be much easier for you to deal with those difficult conversations. And I've created a video series called Bad Apples. In the video series, there are 5 different scenarios. There's the know-it-all boss, where an employee confronts her manager for not adequately listening to her ideas. Second scenario is a employee being confronted by his manager who's not willing to contribute or engage in the team's work. There's an example where a customer is upset, so you can even use this 5 scenarios to hold a difficult or a crucial conversation with a difficult or angry customer. The fourth is actually a peer-to-peer example where a coworker is confronting her coworker who's not committing to and helping make change. And then the last scenario is a whatever employee who is confronted by his boss for having a disengaged approach. So what I'd like to do is I'd like for you to at least get an exposure to this video by watching the change is not in my vocabulary with 2 peers. All right, and again, that's one of the examples in the Bad Apples video that's available if you'd like to purchase it for your use, or in going through the certification, you'll learn how to actually incorporate that into a training module. So let's just go through and recap what the 5 steps are at a glance, and then we're going to dig down deeper into it. The first step is to determine your involvement. You need to decide based on the situation if it is worth your time and your energy. Second step is to understand the other person. Oftentimes this is what I find to be the step that gets forgotten or overlooked, and it's crucial to understand what led them to say or do what they did or not to do. The third is to make sure that you help them understand how their attitude or behavior impacts other people. Once you've done that, you move on to step 4, where you proactively resolve moving forward how the problem is going to be fixed or what you expect of future behavior. And finally, you want to make sure that you leave them, the relationship, on a positive note by recovering and going on. So with those 5 steps in mind, we are going to explore the 5-step process with a relationship that you potentially need to have a crucial or difficult conversation with. And as part of the handouts, there are 2 pages that are labeled case study, and we are going to ask you to think about and fill in your situation as we walk and talk through the process. So the first piece of this is to describe your observations. So on your handout, if you would, write down what you heard that person say, whether it was a comment, a phrase. It could be even the way they said it, so how they sound, because I truly believe that attitudes are communicated not only through words but tone of voice. So maybe it was the way they said it, face-to-face or in a meeting. And then maybe it was a performance issue, so what did they do? It could be anything from their body language to maybe it was something that they did incorrectly, or maybe it was something that they did not do that they were supposed to do. So I'm going to give you some time now just to describe in specific terms what is the situation that you need to understand more about. Then once you've done that, we're ready now to move into preparing for your difficult conversation. So the first step is to determine your involvement. What you need to do is ask yourself a series of 4 questions. Is this person important to me? You can indicate yes or no. For instance, if the person is at work, it might be a coworker, it might be a customer. If it's your employee, you might need, as a manager, to confront them to make sure that they understand what you expect of them. If it's somebody in another department, at home, it might be your child, might be a teenager, might be your spouse, it could be a friend. But if it's somebody who just cuts you off in traffic, or if it's somebody who's in your neighborhood or a complete stranger on the street, it might not be worth your while to get involved. You know, we call people that drive faster than us maniacs. We call people that drive slower than us idiots, and that we believe we establish the standard speed and mode of operation, and everybody else ought to get out of our way. So in the scheme of things, those people are not important. Then you move on to the next question. Has this happened before? You know, everyone's entitled to a bad day now and then, and if it's the first occurrence, maybe they're going through some difficult times. Maybe they've had some stress at home, maybe they're not feeling well. But if it is something that has happened before, it's better to confront sooner versus later, because you don't want to be what I call an enabler. If you tolerate poor performance, guess what you're going to get? You're going to get more poor performance, not only from that person, but from people around them, because they're going to say, hey, I'm tired of carrying the weight, and Sam or Sally or Chris or Pat are not. Then you ask yourself, all right, if it has happened before, are other people affected by it? And my guess is if it's on your radar, you're affected by it. However, Eleanor Roosevelt said it best, no one can make you feel the way you do without your own permission. But if it bothers you or affects other people, Let them know, because maybe they aren't aware of how what they said or what they did or what they didn't do affects the project or affects other people. And then the last step to determine your involvement is, can I invest my time? It's not easy. I'll give you these 5 steps with the hope that you'll learn how to practice and use them. It's not a quick fix. If it's truly a difficult situation, it's going to take even more time. Time to prepare, which I think this case study application will give you some thoughts, even having you write down questions or comments that you want to share, because a lot of times in the heat of the moment, we say things that we will later regret. So you have then, once you go through that first step, an option. If you said the person's not important, it hasn't happened before, it doesn't bother me, or I'm not going to let it bother me, I don't have time now, or I'm not ever going to commit my time to it, you have an option to remove yourself, which means I'm not going to let this person get under my skin. I'm going to move on. But if you said yes, you need to move on to step number 2. Step number 2 is to understand the other person. And the key part or purpose for this step is to avoid making any incorrect assumptions, because you know what happens when we assume. One way to do that is to ask questions and listen to empathize and understand. So on your handout, you'll see the 5 W's and the H. These are the most appropriate questions that you can truly understand the other person. So I'd like for you to actually write down some sample questions that you can understand the other person's actions. So it could be, who was involved in the situation? What happened? When did it occur? Or when did you find out? Where did this occur at? So you can learn the facts. The ultimate power question, why? Why did you say that? Why did you do that? How? How would you like things to be different? So let me give you some time to jot down any one of the examples listed there for your particular situation. And then I'd like for you to share an example in the chat box. I don't need to know anything about the situation, but send to all participants an example of a question you could ask to understand the other person. And I usually find that the shorter the question implies a longer or more open-ended response. So I just wrote down, why did you say, or why did you do that? Or it could be, why didn't you do that? And tone of voice does make a difference. So you'll want to make sure that you use an approachable or non-confrontational tone of voice. All right, thanks for chiming in. All right, what makes you feel that way? Thank you. Restate what you understood them to have said. So am I hearing you correct? When did the issue begin? Thanks, Melissa. Thank you, Rex. So again, the idea is you want to understand what led them to the situation. And then summarizing our thoughts and feelings by saying, gosh, you know what, I didn't realize that you weren't given training, or I didn't realize when that happened. The part of this step is critical in any relationship, and that is to have an attitude of accepting the person. You don't have to like or love somebody. It's the behavior. So if you can separate the person from their behavior, it's going to be a lot easier to confront. This is true in parenting. I know that you can love the child, it's their behavior. And in a work setting, you don't have to even like people, but you have to learn how to accept them for who they are in order for you to work in a daily basis on a team. So now that you know the circumstance, do you still want to make a change? And I'll give you an example. I remember one time I was managing an employee and she was a couple hours late for work, and I immediately thought, uh-oh, we've got a problem. This was before cell phones. So if I would have said or confronted her, I would have been embarrassed, because after she got settled into her office, she came into mind to apologize for being late. She was in a car accident. And I oftentimes feel we think the worst, or we judge people without understanding the other person. So did I need to make a change? No, this is a first occurrence. So once again, you have an option to remove yourself from the situation. The third step, however, if you do want to make a change, is to influence his or her attitude or behavior. So I always focus in on the attitude first because attitudes determine actions. And as the attitude adjuster, I had known and learned that you could do a quick fix by changing or asking people or demanding people to change their behavior. But if you want any long-term, consistent change of behavior, you got to touch on or influence their attitude. So here's how you do it. In my book, I talk about there's 3 different ways. One is to describe how you feel. So on the handout, what you can do is write down your emotions. You know, how do you feel about the situation? Do you feel angry or upset? Do you feel frustrated, irritated? But I want to caution you. In some cases, you might choose to use words that might add fuel to the fire. For instance, let's say you did something wrong, and I came up to you and said I was really mad or angry that you missed the deadline. That really, made me mad. You would most likely come back with a very defensive approach. Well, hey, Michelle, you had no idea how much I had to do, or I just forgot, oh well. The word that I think is much more influential to describe your feelings is the word disappointed. So write down a power word on this step of being disappointed. Whether it was a child, a teenager who let you down, maybe it was a coworker, maybe it was one of your teammates. Because when you say to somebody, I'm disappointed in the outcome, you're letting that person know that you gave them the task or you asked them to do something because you really honestly thought they could. But for some reason, and you can learn why, it didn't work out. So you want them to take some degree of ownership. Another way to influence their attitude is to explain possible consequences. I do want to caution you, however, if you're a manager or a parent, if you're not prepared to follow through with any consequence you pose, your credibility goes down the tubes. For instance, as an employer or as a manager, if you explain that if their performance doesn't improve or that their behavior doesn't change, this could lead to progressive discipline, which would be anything from a verbal, written warning. If you've gone through the hoops and you've had several incidents, you also need to know that if you're at the 2-week or 90-day written warning, that if nothing changes after that time, they're looking at termination. As a parent, it could mean you're going to say that you'll lose your privileges of using the car, your cell phone, you won't be able to have sleepovers, whatever's important to your child. And if things don't improve and you don't follow through and impose the consequence, you have basically lost credibility as a leader or as a parent. Then the third way to influence his or her attitude is to suggest other ways for them to think about it. Have you ever thought about when you said that or when you did that? Maybe it was the case where somebody backstabbed you, or they left a meeting and were complaining about a decision. And you say, did you ever stop to think that when you left the meeting and started complaining about the decision, how frustrating or how demoralizing that may have seemed to the team? Let them know that, I was really disappointed that you didn't bring up your concern to the team or to me so we could confront it. Invite a reaction after all that, saying, well, what do you think? And you might need to have some silence because you need to have them respond to why that might be important to you or to the situation or to their behavior, future behavior, because you've got to gain their agreement that there's a problem. Otherwise, it'll remain yours. Then you move on to the fourth step. So now this is a more problem-solving approach to the process, moving forward by defining future expectations. And like you said on the front end, unmet expectations is the common reason why you have to have a difficult conversation in the first place. So it happened. Now moving forward, you need to prevent it from happening again. So in step 4, you need to make sure you accurately describe future expectations. So let me give you some time to write down on your worksheet, what do you expect the behavior to sound like or look like in the future? It could be anything that you want them to do. Maybe you want them to ask more questions at meetings. Maybe you want to make sure that they follow or read the policies or procedures. You might even refer to a job description or anything that you have in the workplace as a reminder, because maybe they weren't aware or they forgot. Then once you've done that, you'll want to mutually discuss, now how can we help you? And you'll notice that I use the word we. How can we help you? So maybe it's the manager, maybe it's the coworker. You buddy up and help them learn how to do something. Or maybe you need to spend some time, a follow-up to help them, coach them, guide them. And then agree upon the best solution, one that's going to meet those expectations. And then as you move into step number 5, what you want to do as you conclude your conversation is describe how you're going to help them. Maybe it's a follow-up conversation, maybe it's some follow-up training, maybe it's an inspection to see how they're doing or make sure if they've got any questions, you're available. And then when you close the conversation, you want to make sure that you have a good attitude about yourself. And remember, go back to that initial approach to being a coach, not to discipline. You know, you chose to coach that person because you believed they were better than that. And help them understand that's why you chose to coach them. Help them, let them feel good. You know, I really care about you, and that's why we wanted to have this conversation. And then list any ways that you can recognize a change that they've made in their attitude or behavior. And let me give you an example. We had a ground rule in our household that the kids needed to have their beds made and room picked up before they went off to school. And I remember one time after the first day or so, after the first day of school, my stepson Chad's room looked like World War III had hit. His room was cluttered, his bed wasn't made. And so it was important that first day I observed that to tell him what we expected. So that beds needed to be made, clothes needed to be somewhere, not hidden underneath the bed, but in either the hamper or hanging appropriately. And then after that conversation, the next day I went into his room to inspect, and you could have bounced a quarter off that kid's bed. And what was important for his dad and I to do that night at dinner and thereafter, several days, was to reinforce how good he did and made him feel good about his performance. Because so many times people only hear the bad, they don't hear the good. And I truly believe we are conditioning behavior by what we say or do as part of our follow-through. So let me stop before we go further and ask you to type in the chat box which of those steps are going to be most helpful for you in having that difficult conversation. And you can just simply write the number. One, two, three, four, or five. I can tell you the one that oftentimes gets overlooked or not complete is number 2. Oh, there it is. Number 2, oftentimes the understanding the person is missed, and therefore we make assumptions, and we think we know what the problem is, and therefore we don't adequately fix the problem. And I'm not saying that this is easy, but I will say that if you utilize this process, it can truly help you understand what led that person's behavior. Now, one resource that we have in the Bad Apples program is a chart called Understanding Difficult People from Their Perspective. And so if you know of anybody who's quiet, they're stubborn, they're a heckler, they're a rambler, they're a conversationalist, they're the whiner, they've got personality issues, or you have personality problems with them, they tend to get off track, and the one that's the know-it-all, in the survey that we asked you to fill out after this webinar, jot down or request it and we will send it to you as part of our follow-up. And it just helps you understand why somebody might be stubborn and what you can do to better manage them. But what I want to do as our closing exercise is an exercise to help you turn bad apples into good apples. So on the worksheet, you'll see that there are 13 different bad apples. We've changed the names to protect the guilty. And what I'd like you to do for each of those bad apples is to walk away with something that you could say, ask, or do to help them. For instance, one of the things that you need to understand is the why. For instance, why might Brad be bored? Oh, well, Brad might be bored because he's been in the job a long time doing the same thing over and over again. So what you could say to him is, Brad, you know, I really appreciate how long and how talented you are at doing a particular job. You might ask him what he would like to learn. What would you like to learn in this upcoming month or this upcoming quarter or in this next year? So that he can feel as though he's learning to stretch or challenge himself. So therefore, what you might want to do for Brad is restructure his job, or maybe send him off to some training so he could learn something that he's not familiar with. So here's what I'd like you to do. Again, using the month in which you were born, and because we've done Brad, anybody born in January, we'd like you to do number 13. So Timid Tim would be anyone born in January. Everyone else, go to the particular item in the month you were born, and think about something you could say, ask, or do to help turn that bad apple into a good apple. So I'll give you a couple minutes to think that through. Feel free to look back through our handouts, the principles of the 5 steps, or think in terms of why people don't do what they're supposed to do. And then when you're finished, I'd like for you to write down in the chat box for everybody's benefit something that you could say or something that you could ask, and I'd like for you to think about using the 5 W's and the H, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why, or the how questions to practice, and then something that you could do, which might imply referring to a policy, might be a job description, as I mentioned, might be a meeting you want to have. I'll give you about a minute to think and record. All right, and thank you for those coming in. As you are typing them in for everybody's sake, I'm going to walk through these characters, so feel free to add to your worksheet for takeaway purposes of how to deal with these bad apples. We've covered Brad. Now let's talk about Carol Complainer. One thing when we do our customer service training is to recognize that a complaint is really a disguised compliment. And ironically, Erin just typed in about complimenting consistency. With Carol, if she comes to you with a complaint, something that you might say to her is, you know, Carol, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I wasn't aware of the situation. A question would be then to ask her to offer a suggestion. And I truly believe in a culture of excellence, you need to expect people to take ownership of their own problems or their own complaints. So you ask, well, Carol, what would you suggest? What would you like? Because what that means then is you want to welcome complaints, but you want them to take responsibility for developing solutions. And then the last thing you might want to do is to acknowledge the fact that with a complaint comes a compliment. Gregory Gossip, for anybody who was born in March. Looked at Gregory. Gregory obviously wants to spread some potential malicious information. So something that you definitely do not want to do is chime in. My suggestion would be to say, you know, Greg, I appreciate your interest in other people. However, were you aware that we have a policy that talks about gossiping in the workplace, and it's really not in your best interest or use of time to contribute? In fact, I really believe that you are paid for performance, and when you are spending idle time or inappropriate, unproductive time gossiping, you're stealing from the company. The fourth, Betty, busy work. If any of you know those people who are busy, but they're not focused or they're not productive, you might want to help her get some clarity. Something that you could do for her, we did actually at our team quarterly update yesterday, was to pick 3 priorities. So I think there's great magic in 3 things to focus on, 3 things to do, the top 3 priorities. So what you might want to say to Betty is, what are the 3 most important things that you need to get done today? Or in what ways could you feel more productive? You could ask her those things, but she tends to be spinning her wheels unproductively. Roger, rigid. Roger is somebody who oftentimes resists change. And that's very common in the workplace. And so what you might want to do is help Roger recall how he felt on a change that occurred maybe recently or a year ago, and kind of help him realize that, as difficult as that may have seemed, you got through it and you learned. So help him really revamp his thinking about change, suggesting that maybe we take it one step at a time, try it out. Victoria, victim in the workplace, tends to catch the bug, whether it's from her health perspective. You might want to help her not feel so overwhelmed. Really, Victoria is seeking appreciation, is the bottom underlying motivator. So what you might want to do is help her, feel appreciated, that she does tend to take on maybe too much in the workplace. What you could ask her is to encourage her to delegate, not take on the world. And if you have maybe a employee assistance program, you might want to offer some assistance by using that to help them gain some clarity. The William whatever is one of those very disengaged, passive employees who really don't take an interest in involvement. So what you might want to do for William is to ask why. Why do you say that? Maybe it's the whatevers. Maybe it's the oh wells. So again, when you hear those kind of passive-aggressive comments, ask for feedback. Why do you feel that way? Why do you say that? Then give them more reassurance that they do need to take some ownership or responsibility and hold them accountable. Number 8, Lisa, lazy. I truly believe that people are lazy only if they are allowed to be lazy. And I will tell you, I will guarantee, if you allow people to be unproductive, not only are they going to be unproductive, you're going to start losing the good employees, because they're going to resent the fact that they're having to cover for people that are not doing what they're supposed to do. So hold people equally accountable for the workplace. Number 9, doubting Thomas. Thomas will oftentimes doubt that something's possible. Oh, they might say, well, we've tried that before. Oh, it's not going to work. Well, learn more about why he feels that way. Maybe it's because they tried it before 5 years ago. And then ask Thomas to think, that was 5 years ago. We have come a long way as a team, and we have come a long way as an organization. So help him realize that things have changed. Number 10 is Jill, jealous. A lot of times Jill or other people that are jealous is because they feel inferior. So something that you could say to Jill is to say, you've done a lot of good things. Here's what you're able to do, and help her not focus on what she can't do or why she feels as though she's inferior from other people. And I think that's oftentimes why people are jealous. They compare themselves with others. So let's focus on you, Jill, not other people. Number 11, worry Walt. And what I want to do with Walt is help him remember the verse that I learned from my grandpa. My grandpa was Irish, and there's a stone that goes along with the worrying. In life, there's really only 2 things to worry about. You are either sick or you are well. If you are well, you have nothing to worry about. If you are sick, then you only have two things to worry about. You're either going to get better or you're going to die. If you get better, you're not going to have anything to worry about. If you die, well, you're only going to have two things to worry about. You're either going to go up or you're going to go down. If you go up, you're not going to have anything to worry about. And if you go down, you're going to be so busy visiting old friends, you're not going to have anything to worry about. So keep it into perspective. Know what you can and cannot influence. Number 12, Betty Backstabber. Kind of like Gregory Gossip, you want to make sure that you don't chime in or contribute to her backstabbing. The other strategy that I would ask Betty to take is some ownership in her feelings. By asking her, Betty, have you gone to her or him and told how you feel? Because I know people would much rather talk around a person than to go to the source. So I would encourage you to ask Betty to tell or share your feelings versus going around. And last but not least, Tim might be his personality. He might lack the confidence. Maybe you have some very vocal people that he oftentimes feels like he doesn't have a voice. So what you need to do is encourage him, support him, maybe give him a heads up that you want him to contribute to a meeting that's going to be held so he's not taken off guard. So my hope is that these strategies can help you with any of those difficult people or those bad apples to turning bad apples into good apples. If you've got any questions or comments, feel free to type those in during the survey that will be sent to you afterwards. But I want to close with a quote about courage, because I think it does take courage to have difficult conversations. Courage is what it takes to stand up and speak. Courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And my hope with you over this last hour is that you've gained some confidence, some courage to hold one of those coaching, courageous conversations to help somebody who truly can benefit from it. I leave inviting you to join us next month with our links to leadership. We're going to learn how the correlation between leaders and golfers, whether you're a golfer or not, I think you'll learn how to strike par. In September, I invite you to bring attitude in the workplace to your own toolbox by attending our certification September 15th and 22nd. And like I said, if you register for that before September 1st, you'll save $100. The cost is normally $695, but for $595, you can learn how to train the trainer in bringing the bad apples and staying positive in a negative world to your organization. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your feedback. So please take a brief minute after you close out of this webinar and complete the survey to offer comments and suggestions for future topics. And with that, I thank you for joining us today. I couldn't think of a better way to start my birthday with you guys. Have an awesome weekend. Bye for now.